Abraham Lincoln entered history as the man who saved the Union and abolished slavery. His portrait today is a symbol of honesty, courage, and justice. But in his own time, not everyone saw him as a hero. For many, he was a threat, a betrayer of tradition, a man willing to shatter the old order for the sake of his ideas. When Lincoln took office in 1861, the country was already teetering on the brink of civil war. Southern states were seceding one by one, declaring independence from the Union. Yet few realized that beyond the visible political struggle, in the shadows, secret societies were already plotting. And for them, Abraham Lincoln was not just a political adversary, he was enemy number one. Among the most infamous of these was the so-called Order of the Golden Circle. On the surface, it appeared to be a patriotic Southern fraternity, devoted to defending slavery and promoting the expansion of slaveholding territories. But in truth, it was something far darker, a tightly organized network with its own symbols, rituals, and blood oaths of secrecy. Its ultimate goal was chilling, nothing less than the creation of a vast empire of slavery, stretching from the American South through Mexico and into the Caribbean. Lincoln's determination to halt the spread of slavery and ultimately to destroy it made him the single greatest obstacle to their dream. Even before the tragedy at Ford's Theater, whispers of assassination attempts trailed Lincoln like shadows. Newspapers of the day recorded rumors that his life was in danger from the moment he was elected. In 1861, as he traveled by train to his inauguration, Baltimore was the site of a sinister plot. Members of the order allegedly planned to intercept the train and kill him before he could take the oath of office. The scheme was foiled only because Allan Pinkerton's detectives uncovered it in time and spirited Lincoln through the city in secret, disguised and under heavy guard. The plot's failure was public knowledge, but what was less known, and what later researchers discovered in archives, was even more disturbing. Documents from the late 19th and early 20th centuries reveal symbols within the order's correspondence that were not of Southern invention. They were European, emblems and sigils associated with old Masonic lodges across the Atlantic. This raised a troubling possibility. Lincoln was not merely confronting homegrown fanatics, but a transnational web of secret organizations whose influence stretched beyond America's borders. The strongest clue comes from a cryptic entry in the private diary of Senator Henry Wilson, one of Lincoln's most loyal allies. In a passage dated 1862, he wrote, "Tonight I overheard their whispers. They say the order has found allies among those who wear black aprons and worship the circle. They mean to remove him. I do not know how to warn him. Who were these men in black aprons? Masons? Foreign agents? Something else entirely? And what did it mean to worship the circle?" The symbolism of the circle appeared again and again in scattered records, sometimes in connection with European lodges, sometimes in the rituals of Southern cults like the Golden Circle, and sometimes in strange places where religion and politics blurred. But the most unsettling discovery is this. Traces of these networks did not remain confined to the rebellious South. Several reports, now buried deep in the archives of Washington, suggest that members of these societies had infiltrated the capital itself. Some were clerks, others were military officers, and a few even moved in the very halls of Congress. If true, this meant that Lincoln was encircled not only by an open rebellion in the South, but by a secret enemy embedded at the very heart of the Union government. Was the Civil War only a clash of armies, or was it also a hidden war of symbols, oaths, and secret alliances? For Lincoln, the line between politics and conspiracy blurred more with each passing year. And if the Order of the Golden Circle truly stood behind the plots against him, then his assassination in 1865 may have been not just the act of a lone fanatic, but the fulfillment of a plan decades in the making, carried out by forces far more powerful than the history books ever admit. The Order of the Golden Circle was officially born in 1854. Its founder was George Bickley, doctor, self-styled intellectual, and adventurer. To the public, he projected the image of a respectable scholar, but inside burned a fanaticism bordering on madness. Bickley preached that America's destiny was not merely to preserve slavery, but to transform it into the cornerstone of a new empire. That empire, he claimed, would stretch far beyond the plantations of the South. It would encompass Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean islands, an endless ring of tropical lands, a golden circle where slave labor would fuel unimaginable wealth and unchallenged power. On the surface, the vision seemed utopian to its supporters, insane to its critics. Yet the order grew rapidly. Within a few years, tens of thousands had joined its ranks. Members wore special rings, engraved with a sun inside a circle, swore blood oaths in candlelit rooms, and vowed secrecy unto death. Surviving descriptions of their rituals speak of dark chambers, salt circles traced across floors, incantations, read in a strange mixture of English and Latin. But the order was not merely a sect of dreamers. It was a network, political, military, and financial. Its members wormed their way into city councils, into state legislatures, into supply chains for weapons and food. When the Civil War broke out, the order played a hidden hand, running secret stockpiles, smuggling contraband, sabotaging railroads, even plotting raids deep into Union territory. Lincoln understood the threat. As early as 1861, he tasked the Pinkerton Detective Agency with infiltrating and monitoring the order. One surviving report, rediscovered in the 20th century, warned starkly, "The order is everywhere. Baltimore, Louisville, Cincinnati, New Orleans. Their aim is disorder, sabotage, and the removal of the president. They believe his death will open their path." It was this very intelligence that led to one of the most dramatic episodes of Lincoln's life, the secret rerouting of his inaugural journey. Originally scheduled to appear publicly in Baltimore, he was instead smuggled through the city at night, under heavy guard and in disguise. Without that intervention, Lincoln's first assassination attempt might have come not in 1865, but in March 1861. Yet the deeper one looks, the darker the picture grows. A Pinkerton agent named Timothy Webb, who successfully infiltrated a chapter of the order, left chilling notes. They do not merely speak of war, they practice rites. They draw a circle, divide it into four, and place in the center a child's doll. They say, without sacrifice, there is no victory. The same details surface again in independent reports. In 1862, Louisville police raided a clandestine meeting hall and discovered on the floor a chalk circle marked into quadrants, with 4 candles at the edges and a small wooden cross placed at its center. What are we to make of this? For some historians, these rituals were theater, intimidation tactics for initiates. But for others, the symbolism is impossible to ignore, especially because the exact same emblem, a circle divided into 4, appears decades earlier in records connected to the so-called Sisters of Taylor, the mysterious twins said to haunt the shadows of American politics. The possibility is unsettling. Was the Golden Circle simply a political conspiracy of slaveholders? Or had it become absorbed into something larger, a cult whose rituals and symbols predated the Civil War, whose very existence blurred the line between politics and the occult? Evidence of that connection emerges most dramatically in a letter discovered in the 1930s, written by George Bickley himself and sent to a confidant in Texas. In it, he wrote, "All will be decided when he falls. The circle will close. The empire will begin." The wording left little doubt. The he in question, the figure whose death would complete the circle, was none other than Abraham Lincoln. If that is true, then John Wilkes Booth's gunshot at Ford's Theater was not the impulsive act of a lone zealot. It was the endgame of a design years in the making, a design in which the Order of the Golden Circle played a central role. By the beginning of 1862, Abraham Lincoln had come to a chilling realization. His enemies were not only on the battlefields of Virginia and Tennessee. Secret societies, born in the South and spreading into the border states, were steadily worming their way into the very heart of Washington, D.C. The Order of the Golden Circle, the so-called Sons of Liberty, and even branches of European Masonic lodges were said to have their agents in Congress, in government offices, and, most disturbingly, even among the president's own guards. The first warning sign came in the form of a man who would later become infamous, Officer John Parker. In 1865, Parker would be assigned to guard Lincoln at Ford's Theater, only to abandon his post at the decisive moment. What few realize is that 3 years earlier, Parker had already been flagged by Pinkerton detectives. Reports alleged that he maintained contact with a group known as the Southern Brothers, a fraternity long suspected of being a front for the Golden Circle itself. Lincoln knew this, and yet he had little choice. His presidency was plagued by the uncomfortable truth that he could never place complete trust in anyone. His closest aide, John Nicolay, wrote in one letter, "He often says, 'I am surrounded by shadows.' He smiles when he says it. But I know. He understands that among us walk those who wish to see him dead." The paranoia was not unfounded. Around the same time, Washington was shaken by the scandal of Senator Jesse Brighton, accused of maintaining ties with the order. Newspapers published excerpts of letters in which Brighton referenced a great circle to which all must serve. The scandal was hushed up swiftly, yet only weeks later, Brighton was quietly inducted into a private Masonic lodge, rumored to include several powerful politicians. The Pinkertons pressed on, collecting intelligence with growing urgency. One particularly disturbing report, rediscovered in the 1920s, described the hidden life of the capital. We have established that no fewer than 3 secret clubs operate in Washington. Their members gather at night in the basements of hotels and theaters. Their emblem is a circle divided into 4. They speak of sacrifice. The president's name is invoked again and again. Lincoln, always a man of measured composure, began to show signs of strain. He stayed late in his study, scrawling long letters, only to burn them in the fireplace. He spoke in fragments to his family and staff, leaving behind eerie confessions. One servant later recalled hearing him murmur to his wife, Mary, "If they kill me, know this. It will not be Booth. It will be those who have played the game for years." Such words never appeared in official transcripts or speeches, but whispers of them survived in the oral recollections of household staff. The paradox was cruel. Even among his generals and advisors were men rumored to have once attended Masonic lodges, institutions now tightly entangled with the networks of the Golden Circle. Were these merely coincidences? Or was Washington itself infiltrated, its very leadership compromised by forces that dreamed of reshaping America from the shadows? Historians remain divided. Yet one truth is difficult to deny. Lincoln governed in an atmosphere of siege. He was fighting not only Jefferson Davis's Confederacy, but also an invisible enemy whose reach extended into the corridors of the White House itself. Against this backdrop, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln ceases to resemble a lone fanatic's lucky shot. Instead, it emerges as the final act of a script years in the making, a script written by men in dark rooms, tracing circles in salt, and whispering oaths over flickering candles. And Lincoln himself seemed to sense it. In private moments, he left behind fragments, dark, prophetic words that suggest he foresaw not only his death, but the shadowed hands that would deliver it. In the next chapter, we will look closely at those prophecies, dreams, letters, and chilling testimonies that reveal how Abraham Lincoln seemed to know the end was coming long before the shot rang out at Ford's Theater. Abraham Lincoln always struck his contemporaries as a man of somber temperament. His biographers often wrote of his melancholy nature, of his tendency to withdraw into long silences, to speak of fate, mortality, and the brevity of life. Yet in the final years of his life, something darker began to take hold, something that went beyond the ordinary weight of his responsibilities. In the spring of 1865, just weeks before his death, Lincoln described a dream to his closest friends that would later chill the nation. In the dream, he wandered through the White House and found it draped in mourning. In the East Room stood a coffin, covered by a flag. Soldiers stood at attention while citizens filed past, many of them weeping. Lincoln asked one of the guards, "Who has died in the White House?" The soldier replied, "The President. He was killed by an assassin." This account was preserved by his friend and bodyguard, Ward Hill Layman, who later swore that Lincoln retold the dream in vivid, disturbing detail. Within weeks, the dream would become reality. But that was not the first time Lincoln experienced such visions. 2 years earlier, in January 1863, at a time when Union armies were suffering devastating defeats, Lincoln confided to his wife Mary that he had seen something unsettling in the mirror. He saw his own reflection doubled. One face was vibrant and alive, the other pale and corpse-like. Mary took it as an omen, that he would be elected to a second term, but that he would not survive to complete it. To many contemporaries, these were nothing more than the exhausted hallucinations of a man under unimaginable stress. But when placed alongside the uncanny accuracy of later events, the coincidences are far more disturbing. Context makes the picture darker still. Lincoln knew he was the target of secret societies. Pinkerton agents constantly warned him of the Order of the Golden Circle, a clandestine organization plotting against him. He knew there were men in Congress who whispered openly of his removal. Against this backdrop, his dreams and visions take on a haunting resonance, as though his subconscious was not merely anxious, but tuned into the danger circling closer. Historians still debate whether Lincoln's dreams were products of his mind or something more. To skeptics, they were the predictable result of a weary president's mind under strain. But to those who believe in the mystical, they appear as warnings, signs of a fate already sealed, glimpses into the future that he could neither prevent nor escape. Meanwhile, the movements of the Order of the Golden Circle grew more ominous. Pinkerton reports from April 1865 mentioned the Order's preparations for what they called a great sacrifice. In one intercepted letter, a chilling phrase appeared: "The circle will be completed in Washington." Did Lincoln's dreams mirror his fears because he knew of such plots? Or did they carry a deeper meaning? Was he, in some sense, being drawn into the orbit of a ritual or design larger than politics? Mary Lincoln herself would later add another layer to the mystery. After his assassination, she claimed that just a week before the fateful night at Ford's Theater, her husband said to her, "I know I shall be killed, but it will not be by chance. It will be the end of a long plan." Those words sound like a verdict, an acknowledgement that his life struggle was not just against rebellious states, but against an invisible power, a hidden hand reaching for him through the shadows. If that is true, then the forces arrayed against him, the Order of the Golden Circle, the underground lodges, the whispers in Washington's corridors, were not simply political adversaries. They were something greater, something older, something that believed sacrifice itself had power. And if Booth was only the man who pulled the trigger, then the true architects of Lincoln's death may never have stood on any stage. They may have been in the shadows all along, cloaked not in theater costumes, but in symbols, circles, and secrets. In the next chapter, we will unravel how the Order of the Golden Circle and allied Masonic lodges intersected in the conspiracy, and why the name of John Wilkes Booth may be nothing more than the mask for a far darker story. In the official version of history, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln is presented as the act of a single man, John Wilkes Booth, the Southern sympathizing actor turned fanatic. Yet documents and testimonies that surface decades later suggest a very different story. Booth was no lone wolf. He was part of a tightly bound group of 9 men who plotted not only Lincoln's murder, but a simultaneous strike against Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William Seward. The plan was audacious: to decapitate the Union government in a single night, sow chaos, and give the South one final chance to reclaim power. The official investigation acknowledged Booth and his closest associates, but what it never recorded in its trial transcripts were the words they spoke to one another in secret. Those words appear in a report filed by a Pinkerton agent who had infiltrated Washington's shadowy circles. His account is chilling. They swore on blood. They did not call themselves brothers, but sons of the circle. Their symbol was drawn upon the wall, a circle divided into 4. They said the president's death would complete an oath made many years ago. This language did not fit the narrative of a desperate conspiracy hatched in the last days of war. Ritual symbols, blood oaths, the invocation of the circle, all of it pointed toward links with the Knights of the Golden Circle and the clandestine lodges that had long operated in the South. Some researchers claim Booth was never just an actor. His father, Junius Brutus Booth, was a Mason. The family's social ties included men involved in occult practices and secret brotherhoods. Was it coincidence, or had Booth been raised within a world that prepared him for his role? After the assassination, investigators searched the boarding house of Mary Surratt, one of Booth's conspirators. Among her papers, they found a sheet covered in symbols. At its center was the familiar image, a circle quartered by a cross. Officially, the evidence was marked of no significance. Yet those who saw it insisted it was the mark of a cult. Other fragments strengthened the suspicion. Surviving letters from Booth contain cryptic phrases: "I am only part of a greater work. When the circle is complete, my role is ended." Most of these lines never appeared in public records. They were quietly filed away or destroyed. The trial of the conspirators was swift, staged more for display than truth. 4 were hanged, the rest imprisoned. Few dared ask whether these 9 were true architects or merely pawns in a deeper game. And then there is the body. When Booth was cornered and killed 12 days after the assassination, his family insisted the corpse was not his. In Southern newspapers, rumors spread like wildfire. Booth lives. He has gone to his brothers. Who were those brothers? When the fragments are assembled, a darker picture emerges. Lincoln did not die at the hands of a lone zealot. His death was the culmination of a conspiracy, years in the making, in which the Knights of the Golden Circle, Masonic lodges, and hidden societies intertwined. Which brings us to the ultimate question: why? Why would such forces wish to eliminate Abraham Lincoln? The answer may lie not only in politics or slavery, but in something stranger. Booth and his companions spoke of an oath. They spoke of completing the circle. For them, Lincoln's death was not simply an assassination. It was the fulfillment of a ritual. In the next chapter, we will examine the evidence suggesting that Lincoln's murder carried not just political weight, but mystical significance, a sacrifice meant to seal a covenant hidden deep in America's secret history. The official history tells us that on April 14, 1865, inside Ford's Theater, the actor John Wilkes Booth fired a single shot into President Lincoln, and that was the end of the story. But if one looks deeper, The coincidences of that evening seem far too deliberate to dismiss as chance. First, the choice of venue. Ford's Theater was not the most fashionable in Washington, yet according to police reports from 1864, its back rooms had hosted clandestine meetings of Southern sympathizers and former members of the Knights of the Golden Circle. Several witnesses later claimed they had seen circle signs marked on the walls there. Second, the date. April 14th, Good Friday, the very day associated with sacrifice and death. The conspirators surely knew that striking on this date would carry not just political, but symbolic weight, resonating like a ritual offering. Third, the act itself. Booth fired a single shot into the back of Lincoln's head at the precise moment when the audience was laughing at a line in the comedy. It was not only an assassination, it was a theatrical gesture, a staged ritual. Booth knew his words would echo through the hall. He shouted, "Sic semper tyrannis!" Thus always to tyrants. Yet some witnesses swore he uttered more than that. A few claimed they heard him speak another, unfamiliar Latin phrase, later interpreted by scholars as part of a Masonic oath. Coincidence? Or had Booth recited a vow learned long before the night of the shooting? There is also the matter of Booth's ring. On his hand, he reportedly wore a gold band engraved with the symbol of a circle divided into 4 parts. After his death, the ring disappeared from the official inventory of his possessions. Was it an ornament or the emblem of an order? Then comes the most chilling discovery. In the surviving archives of the Surratt family, whose boarding house had been the conspirators' base, a single sheet was found. On it, a circle, 4 dots, and beside them, the initials AL. Some researchers believe it was a sacrifice chart, placing Abraham Lincoln at its center. The logic of the plot seems to align with this. The goal was not simply to eliminate the president, but to decapitate the Union government itself. Yet Lincoln's death was singled out as unique. He had to die not in private, but in the theater, in the presence of hundreds of witnesses, his blood becoming the final act of the war. And when we recall the entries from Robert Hill's diary, Taylor's aide who wrote of children in the circle decades earlier, the pattern becomes darker. Lincoln, too, appears as a figure drawn into the same tradition. Presidents ensnared by an oath whispered in shadows. Even the aftermath carries symbolic echoes. Lincoln was carried across the street, into the Peterson House, where he died at dawn on April 15th. In Catholic tradition, that was the very day when the rites of Holy Week concluded. To skeptics, these are coincidences. To others, they are evidence of a carefully staged ritual. When his body was prepared for burial, one servant later claimed he saw a faint mark upon the president's forehead, the imprint of a circle. Officially, nothing was said. But the rumor spread quickly through Washington, and with it came another. That Lincoln had not been merely the victim of a fanatic, but the final offering in an oath sworn long before in the era of Zachary Taylor. Thus, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln becomes not only a national tragedy, but the culmination of a hidden story, one in which politics and mysticism converged into a single, inexorable ritual. After Lincoln's assassination, Washington descended into chaos. The nation, barely emerging from the horrors of the Civil War, now faced a new kind of trauma. The president was dead. The conspiracy was exposed. Yet the questions that lingered were no fewer than those that had existed before. The official story insists that John Wilkes Booth was killed 12 days later in Virginia, cornered in a burning barn. His body was brought to Washington and buried in secrecy. But doubts arose almost immediately. Relatives claimed the body was not his. Newspapers published rumors that Booth had escaped south, then to Canada, even across the Atlantic to Europe. Alleged sightings of him appeared decades later. Coincidence? Or did the Order of the Golden Circle help him vanish into the shadows? The other conspirators faced swift judgment. 4 were executed, including Mary Surratt, the boarding house owner where the plotters met. Her death marked the first execution of a woman in U.S. history. Yet the strangeness lies in what disappeared before the trial even began. Many documents seized from her home were destroyed. Among them, witnesses later recalled, was a sheet marked with the circle's symbols. Why did those papers vanish? Why was no one allowed to speak of them in court? Others were condemned to life sentences. But even here, anomalies multiplied. One conspirator, Edmund Spangler, died suddenly in prison. The official cause? Lung disease. Yet his cellmates swore that the night before he had whispered, "I told too much about the circle. Now they will come for me." Another, Lewis Powell, the man who attacked Secretary Seward, spoke strange words on the eve of his execution. "I did not choose the victim. The victim was chosen for me." His statement was dismissed as the rambling of a doomed man. But what if it was the truth? The greatest mystery surrounds the fate of the Pinkerton files. The famed detective agency had infiltrated Washington's conspiratorial networks. Their reports described not only Booth and his accomplices, but connections to Masonic symbols, to the Order of the Golden Circle, to the possibility that Lincoln's assassination was not merely political, but ritualistic. And yet, by the late 19th century, a significant portion of these documents had vanished. Historian Otto Iverson, who worked with the Pinkerton archives in the 1920s, claimed he once saw a sealed report stamped confidential. In it, he said, were the words, "The president's death bore the character of a rite. Evidence exists of the influence of secret societies. Further investigation is prohibited." That report has never been seen again. In the end, the plotters were punished, but the network remained in the shadows. Those who might have known more died under suspicious circumstances. Those who could have spoken fell silent. And this silence created new questions. If Booth was merely a pawn, who stood above him? If the Order of the Golden Circle was truly tied to the assassination, why did none of its leaders ever face retribution? No answer has ever emerged, but every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. Lincoln's death did not end their story. It opened a new chapter. In the next section, we will examine how the secret societies exploited Lincoln's death, and why his assassination became, for them, the symbol of a circle completed. After Lincoln's death, America drowned in mourning. His funeral train passed through multiple states. Millions lined the streets to bid farewell to the fallen president. For the people, he became a martyr. But for the secret societies of the 19th century, his death carried a very different meaning. In the archives of a Masonic lodge in Louisville, discovered only in the 20th century, researchers uncovered a meeting protocol dated June 1865. It contained the chilling words, "The great sacrifice has been made. The circle is complete. The union renewed with blood." Historians still struggle to explain this fragment. Some dismiss it as forgery. Yet, if it is authentic, then Lincoln's death was interpreted not as an assassination, but as a ritual sacrifice, an offering to complete an oath whispered long before the Civil War. The Order of the Golden Circle, though broken as a political force after the Confederacy's collapse, survived in the shadows. In the 1870s, Southern newspapers occasionally reported on gatherings of former knights, nocturnal meetings where members spoke of the Circle's legacy. Witnesses claimed that on the walls of such halls, the old symbols reappeared, a circle divided into 4 parts. But why Lincoln? Why was he chosen as their sacrifice? The answer may lie in his politics. Lincoln shattered the dream of a slaveholding empire. the very goal for which the order had been founded. More than that, he spoke openly of human equality. For those whose wealth and power had been built on chains and blood, Lincoln was not just an enemy. He was the destroyer of their world. His elimination, then, was not simply the killing of a president. For them, it was the restoration of balance, the fulfillment of an oath, the closing of a circle begun decades earlier. By the late 19th century, the circle's symbolism began to appear elsewhere. In the records of a New Orleans lodge, one passage reads, "Every age demands its sacrifice. The sons of the circle continue the work. We shall preserve the blood of the great within our bonds." The phrase, "the blood of the great," has disturbed researchers ever since. Did it mean these societies saw themselves as guardians of presidential bloodlines? Or did it mean something darker, that they chose, generation after generation, who would die and who would be sanctified as a symbol? Some scholars argue that after the Civil War, the order transformed, merging with other secret networks, Masonic lodges, political clubs, occult brotherhoods. Out of this mixture grew a shadowed tapestry in which Lincoln's death was no accident, but a precedent, a ritual etched into the tradition of hidden power. And perhaps that is why, decades later, echoes resurfaced. In the early 20th century, during a gathering in Texas, a transcript contained the words, "As with Lincoln, so shall others fall." The pattern became difficult to ignore. After Lincoln came Garfield, then McKinley, then Kennedy. Presidents struck down, their deaths accompanied by whispers of conspiracies and secret hands. For the American people, Lincoln was the martyr president, the savior of the Union. For secret societies, he became something else entirely, a seal, a sacrifice, the completion of a circle. Perhaps that is why his spirit still lingers in America's memory, not only as the great emancipator, but as a victim, one whose death was not only history's tragedy, but also part of a hidden war that continues to haunt the nation. After the execution of Lincoln's conspirators, it seemed that the story was finished. America tried to heal the wounds of the Civil War and move forward. But rumors and legends lived on, quietly shaping the shadows of history. In 1881, when President James Garfield was shot, strange parallels emerged once again. One eyewitness claimed that shortly before the attack, he saw a symbol scrawled on the wall of Washington's train station, a circle divided into 4 parts. Few paid attention, but a brief mention of the sign of the circle appeared in the Washington Star. 2 decades later, in 1901, President William McKinley was assassinated, and again, whispers of an invisible hand surfaced. In the archives of a New York Masonic lodge, researchers later found a cryptic entry. "The great sacrifice is renewed. The empire continues its path." The phrasing echoed ominously with the lodge notes from 1865 after Lincoln's death. But the most unsettling connections appeared in the 20th century. In 1963, after the assassination of John F. Kennedy in Dallas, conspiracy researchers revisited the archives and discovered a disturbing pattern. Nearly every president who had been assassinated, or even targeted, was linked to reform, equality, or structural change. They all sought to break old orders, and they all became victims of conspiracies that were never fully solved. It was then that researchers revived the specter of Lincoln and the Order of the Golden Circle. Some claimed the conspiracy did not die in the 19th century. It transformed, shed old faces, and reappeared under new names, but preserved its symbols and rituals. A chilling piece of evidence came from Louisiana, a document dated 1935, belonging to a little-known group called the Society of the Brothers of Light, which held its meetings in New Orleans. The text read, "The circle is never broken. From Taylor to Lincoln, from Garfield to Kennedy. We choose those who threaten our order. Their blood feeds the Union. Historians remain divided on whether this document is authentic or a hoax. Yet the mere fact of its discovery fueled dozens of theories. What if Lincoln's death was not an isolated tragedy, but the opening chapter of a chain? What if the circle symbol was not a myth, but a genuine mark of a network that for centuries selected its victims from among American presidents? By the 1970s, when Lincoln's body was exhumed once more to confirm his identity, newspapers whispered about strange marks found on the burial cloth. No details were ever given, but the rumors spread like wildfire. Even today, on the fringes of conspiracy forums, one can find the same claim repeated. Lincoln's assassination was the beginning of the so-called presidential curse, a string of deaths and attacks that continues into the modern age. Coincidence? Or the lingering hand of a society born in the 19th century, still weaving its secret pattern into the highest offices of the nation? For the nation, his death was a tragedy. For the people, he became a martyr, a symbol of freedom and unity. But for those who moved in the shadows, his death was something else, part of a ritual, a single link in a chain stretching through the history of America. Today we are taught to see Booth's plot as a local act of revenge carried out by fanatics. But documents, diaries, and lost reports suggest otherwise. Lincoln confronted an invisible network, the Order of the Golden Circle, Masonic lodges, secret societies whose goals went far beyond politics. Their language was symbols, their strength was ritual, their sacrifices were precedents. Lincoln was not the first, and he was not the last. His death seemed to open a new cycle. Garfield, McKinley, Kennedy. Each of them tried to transform the country, each of them challenged the old order, and each of them fell. Coincidence? Or the continuation of the circle so often mentioned in the writings of the 19th century? In partially released archives, one chilling line survived. America does not belong to those who elect her. She belongs to those who guard her blood. Who wrote these words remains unknown, but they echo through the diaries of Lincoln's aides, through Booth's letters, through the records of hidden orders. This is why the assassination of Lincoln still haunts us. We know the names of the plotters, we know the date and the place, but we do not know the most important truth: who was really behind them. Perhaps it was the order, vanishing into the smoke of history. Perhaps it was something older, wearing the mask of political clubs. But one thing is undeniable. Every time America loses a leader to an assassin's bullet, the shadow of Lincoln rises again, a reminder that his death was not chance. It was a symbol, and if the circle truly exists, then it has never been broken. It only waits for the next victim. If you found this story chilling and thought-provoking, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Your support helps uncover more hidden pieces of history.